All right, I think we are live. We're live. We're live both on Facebook and YouTube. So, welcome. Hi, hi everyone. Welcome to welcome to the content exploration sessions. This is session 10 this year, 2017. So we're going to talk about content curation, a little bit of distribution, paid content distribution, recommendation engines, and so forth. And
that's what we're talking about here?
That's what we're talking about. You didn't get the outline?
No, I'm in the wrong live stream.
Yes.
I thought we were talking about
Okay.
economic development in Eastern Europe.
You have insight into that?
I do. Do you want to hear about it?
No.
Oh.
Let's not. Let's not. Okay. Anyway, all right. We are Britain Marketing Design Group. My name is Nick. I am a content strategist here. We are a creative design agency, marketing agency. We really focus on brand-centered content creation and so forth. Go to BritainMDG.com if you want to know more. These little sessions, 30 minutes or so, we are going to just have a panel discussion about content curation practices, best practices, and so forth. We'll talk a little bit about Pinterest and potentially other social networks and platforms. So hopefully you'll get a couple of takeaways from maybe some of this conversation. Hopefully it will be helpful and useful for you. We have 2 more sessions left here this year, which we do these last Friday of each month if we can. Client things can come in between sometimes, but it's always the last Friday each month. Next Friday will be, next session will be cool. We'll go through a whole case study of a project we did for a client from start to finish and kind of show you, talk a little bit about how that worked. And then in December, we'll do a little bit of a review of the year and kind of maybe talk a little bit about reporting and data visualization and things like that. So anyway, like I said, my name is Nick. This is Kara. I was trying to get some dirt on Kara from AJ yesterday. So I could
asking the wrong person. How much you want?
Introduce her. Oh, you got the dirt on Kara? But this is Kara. Kara, tell us what you do and a little bit real quick.
Yeah, definitely. I am Britain's digital storyteller. So that basically means I do social media for our clients, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest, and I also help out with the Britain social media. So any Britain social media accounts you can see, Nick and I kind of tag team that. And I also help out with any kind of copywriting needs for blogs or other projects that we're working on at Britain. So yeah, a little bit of everything.
All of the things.
Yeah.
What about bedtime stories?
Bedtime stories, I don't have any of those. Sorry, guys.
Sorry, I'm tired.
Yeah, right.
It's okay.
This is
Got
Dave.
time.
This is Dave. He's our digital strategist and paid media manager. What's up?
So, I thought you were gonna say like, "What do you do?" But then you just said it. So
Yeah.
I had this big long thing planned.
I ruined it again.
It was gonna actually be exactly what Kara said.
I ruined it. Oh, okay.
Stole his thunder.
Bedtime storytelling.
But I also do bedtime stories. So.
Okay. And Dave's been with us here for a while, and he comes from the radio background, so we always feel inferior to him when it comes to this kind of amplifying your voice and that kind of stuff, because he has a good voice. So
I can speak loudly when I need to.
yeah. So when we check levels
Right.
on mics,
Right.
it's
Then I'll
don't
be
do
like,
it with
"Hey!"
Dave. Don't do it with
That's
Dave.
good.
Sorry about that, Chris. He jumped over there, so that's good. Anyway, so that's a blooper. We'll do that. That's the outtakes of this. So don't yell anymore.
All right, fine.
Okay. Let's start talking about content curation,
Okay.
content distribution, and
right.
paid content distribution. Let's start kind of from the bottom with content curation. We deal and we live in a industry that has a lot of buzzwords. What is content curation to you, and how do we kind of employ it here? I'm going to let you get your take in first here.
All right. I would say content curation is just any kind of interesting articles or photos or posts that you find online that kind of speak to whatever it is that your page is about, or that you're trying to, whatever point you're trying to make. So for one of our clients, Junk Ditch, what we do a lot of times for content curation is look at photos that people took of the food that they ate at the restaurant, or we'll look at, any kind of reviews that are on Yelp or something like that. Content curation is just curating other people's content and with a purpose.
And the most notable platform out there for content curation is obviously Pinterest, and we'll continue to talk about that here in a little bit. But that's great. How the root strategy of content curation is really just kind of how can we harness and organize content and then effectively kind of distribute it. Some of it could be ours, some of it could be the general public's and so forth. It could be user generated and so forth. So,
and to piggyback off of what Kara said, we're curating for the target audience. So it's not just necessarily any restaurant food pictures. It's what's right for the message they want to get across, for that audience, the brand voice and tone, and it's taking all of that brand strategy into account in addition to finding content. I think that matches, the strategy.
Absolutely. So what do you think is from just a utility standpoint when we talk about content curation? Why is it valuable?
I just think there's so much information out there in the world right now that it's hard to sift through everything. You can run a Google search on, say you're on Pinterest and you want to do like wedding ideas. So you can run a Google search for wedding ideas, but that's such a broad category of information now because you're getting weddings of all types, and maybe you want a small country wedding. Well, then if you go on Pinterest and you click, country, rustic, wedding, you're going to automatically get a really highly filtered search of exactly what you're looking for. And so content curation basically just makes the search process easier for people who are interested in those same categories, I feel like.
So it's narrowing everything down into smaller, more disseminated. It's a better way to.
Dissemination?
Yes, thank you. Would you like to continue with?
I was just going to add that, that by curating content and putting everything under one kind of umbrella, whether it's by topic or by audience and the things that they're interested in and the brand voice and tone, you're also setting yourself up for the engagement part of what would be like the next step. So you're finding all of that content that and interest that's going to be in common, so that when somebody finds it, when they find all that country wedding stuff on Pinterest, they can engage with it because we already know that's what they're looking for. And then when you have the engagement, you see more interaction, more reach, more impressions, and it all works as part of the machine. So
and the cornerstone of that is just user-generated content. It's a user-generated world nowadays with crowdsourcing and from that standpoint. So it is interesting. I like what you said. There's so much information and content being created out there. So why not use some of it? Because there's a lot of good stuff out there. And if it's applicable for your audience and you can attribute it and everything, then it makes perfect sense from a strategy standpoint, because it also is a little bit of it can be a little bit of we are a good steward for this specific market segment too. We're sharing other people's content and so forth. So that's kind of playing well amongst each other and so forth. So
and people are usually pretty excited to see their stuff featured. I feel like as long as you're attributing it to them, people usually like seeing their Instagram photos used or their Pinterest pins reshared, because it kind of validates them as a creator and what they're contributing. So it's cool that you can have those networks of sharing.
Yeah, and it automatically adds a layer of kind of amplification to it, because you're involving other people's content, and they have other networks, and that spreads over and so forth. So it's really a kind of a win-win scenario when you use proper attribution, of course, which is key to content curation, of course. So very cool. There was something I was going to say, but I think I forgot about it. Maybe we'll come back later.
Was it about dissemination?
It was not about dissemination. It was not. It was actually about curation. So, but anyway.
Do you have anything to speak on dissemination?
I do not. No,
Okay.
no. I'm going to move away from dissemination.
Just thought I would check. I don't want to have you miss the opportunity.
Okay. All right. Okay. So let's talk about content distribution. Not from a paid perspective. We'll talk about that in a little bit. I want to, I guess, frame the conversation up from a distribution standpoint, that there's kind of two ways that brands do it, right? They do it really well on one channel, or they do it really well on multiple channels, right? because distribution is part of it. It's part of your marketing process. It's the one where you choose what channels that you should be messaging on, right? So I mean this is a topic in itself for a long conversation. But what are we seeing from a distribution standpoint? Kind of what the climate landscape looks like right now. Any insights that you've seen? Any trends or anything?
I mean, I think that how you distribute your content is really dependent on your audience, and it's important to not. It used to be you would go on these really broad channels like radio or TV or the newspaper, and you couldn't separate out audiences. It was just kind of broadcasting to everyone that read the paper, everyone that watched Seinfeld, and now with digital, you can separate those audiences. So you don't have to broadcast everyone and be everything to everyone. You can be very specific, and it seems like there are more and more places to distribute your content that are even more and more specific. So I mean, it becomes a problem with scaling a little bit, but but I think that kind of continues to be a trend is very specific niche audiences,
which can be a good thing if you're talking about wedding photos or something like that. But it also does present an issue with the news. I think we've seen a lot politically that when you're talking to a very specific audience and only catering to that audience, on both the left and the right side, you can have very partisan debates, and that's kind of where you get a lot of these partisan issues that come up because people are creating these echo chambers of one idea, one way of thinking, and it really creates a lot of some of the fake news that we've been seeing circulate on social media. So
yeah, that's a good point, because depending on what channel you determine to message on, you have to play by their rules. And a lot of the networks and channels that are out there from a digital perspective, their algorithm steers that kind of either it's going to be chronological, it's going to be driven by an algorithm, or a combination of both. Facebook is obviously the primary example of here. They curate, and they through their algorithm they determine what you will see, and that in itself creates an echo chamber, right? And that's exactly where we're at. We have to consider that in when we determine what our distribution strategy should be. So I think that's really valuable. And then you go into the whole audiences, sub-audiences, and segments and sub-segments. I think it was a good kind of description you gave from Pinterest. You have wedding photos, and then you have wedding this and wedding this. So you can do that. It's just it can pose problems when you try to scale it, right?
Yeah,
definitely. So that's the interesting thing. Let's talk. What is content distribution from a paid perspective? We're talking, or content amplification, or content recommendation. Couple of different semantics there.
Right. So for us, we call it content distribution, but it's all kind of the same. It's how can you distribute content on a wide platform that gives the opportunity for a new audience to see it. And some of those content distribution platforms that we have used or looked at are like Outbrain, Taboola, Rev Content, Gravity. There's a lot of them out there, and they're often those sponsored stories that you see on another website. It could be CNN or Fox News. It could be TechCrunch or people.com. So there's often stories that are sponsored stories, suggested stories, and it might be because you looked at something else or based on your search habits. It might be based on a certain audience segment that you fit in, or it might be based on geography, your location. And they can actually be really effective for reaching people on a wide scale, but you also have to watch out. Like if you're the one distributing the content, you have to make sure you keep track of the sites that you're on, so you're not on sites that are maybe not a great fit for your brand. But it can be really super effective and can drive a lot of traffic to your site, and we've seen that with a lot of our clients.
Yeah, and we've also seen, obviously, this is content recommendation engines or distribution platforms. They certainly have evolved, especially this last year as well. where they have a lot of quality control standards built into the content that they display. They're also adding a lot of targeting, correct?
They are adding targeting just in the last couple of weeks. Taboola added audience segments, which takes data from Newstar or Axiom or other data sources, and then you can show content to specific audience segments that might be based on purchasing habits, which could be very helpful, and you can make your content more relevant, which can lead to engagement, and
Yeah.
that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, and I think the why they this sort of advertising is interesting to us is it can feel kind of native. It's part of native publishers' platforms, so that's a good thing. There's also a low barrier of entry from an advertiser standpoint. Because you maybe the cost of production isn't that high, so you can also do a lot of multivariate testing, which is always good.
Right.
So there's definitely a couple of things that we look at there. So, all right, let's segue to curation platforms. Pinterest, we heard it. I just stumbled on a curation platform this week. I think it was on TechCrunch, called Mr. Owl.
I missed that one.
Mr. Owl is a curation platform which curates. You can create collections of any kind of data source on the internet. So blogs, websites, whatever, recipes, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what content type it is. You can funnel it into one thing. So the example I saw was like secret recipes, and then in secret recipes it had Arby's secret recipes and McDonald's secret. So it was kind of
So it wasn't like you were taking somebody else's secret and
someone had curated like all these secret
because
recipes.
if they told you it was a secret, like it's up to you to make sure it
Right.
stays a secret.
That's
You have to
true.
be a good friend.
Yeah. So
I want to know, is the owl like the same guy with the Tootsie Pops? Like how many licks does it take to get to the center? Is that Mr. Owl? Or is that a different owl?
there might be some copyright infringement.
That's
Is
what
that
I'm wondering,
you're-
right?
I don't know. I'm gonna have to take
that
a look. So
Data he's collecting.
anyway, so but that's what curation platforms do, right? They find ways to create segments of content that a segment of an audience will really like. So
I noticed that after I made that joke, your body language went to this.
the
Do
Mr.
you,
Owl,
do you think that wasn't a good joke?
it was meh. I'm gonna be
A dad
honest
joke.
with you. Yeah. So let's talk. From a curation standpoint, Pinterest is obviously the main one. What are some things that we should think about when we curate the content on Pinterest? How are people using it? What works? What doesn't work? And
When
so
you're
forth?
curating content or you're
Or
distributing the content on Pinterest?
How about both? How about we talk about both? So, do you want?
Yeah. Curating, I always feel like it's really interest-based. Obviously, Pinterest, but I always try to think kind of the DIY, the do-it-yourself person is on Pinterest. Someone who's really looking for inspiration, whether it's creative inspiration or home inspiration. So anything that would speak to a specific interest or a reason that I might go there myself. Do I want to see interior design? So if you're a paint company, you might have a whole wall a whole Pinterest board that's wall colors, or accent walls or something like that, and just how they work in home design. So I think just trying to think like the user is a strong way of doing it.
Yeah.
Thinking about why someone might be coming to your Pinterest board with your specific brand, and kind of think around the topic. So if you are a paint company trying to have a Pinterest board, you're not just going to have paint colors on there.
Yeah.
You're going to have home design. You might have some DIY projects. Anything that someone who's going to purchase paint might be interested in learning about.
And if I could take that one step further, you can think about, and really from a paid perspective almost, but if you're trying to distribute your content and have it seen, or if you're looking for content, it's a lot about keywords. So it's kind of an SEO kind of mind frame. So you want to make sure that your titles of whatever you're distributing have those keywords in it. Like if you're talking about a country rustic wedding, you want to make sure those words are in there so that Pinterest picks it up when you're searching for it if you're curating things. So that I think is really important. The other thing to remember is there's a lot of intent on Pinterest. So if you're an advertiser, and you're trying to get your stuff out there, you know, Pinterest can be really good for conversion. The question is, am I getting married next week, or am I getting married in 2 years, or maybe I haven't even found the right significant other yet, so it's just aspirational. But there is some intent there to keep in mind that could lead to, you know, traffic to your site or conversion and things like that from a paid perspective.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Pinterest just opened up search ads.
Absolutely, just in the last couple of weeks.
So that's something that we're definitely looking at, and that kind of adds another layer of really interest in that platform, I think, because from our experience, we've seen a lot of good traffic and conversions from this specific channel. Now to add a layer of search on that, that's really interesting.
Yes.
So, yeah. What else do we want to talk about when it comes to Pinterest? Boards, keywords, pins.
Recipes. Got any good recipes on Pinterest?
I'm not a frequent user of Pinterest, but I'm not a frequent user of any social network right now. So
I have noticed you haven't tweeted in a while.
Everyone noticed that, I'm sure. So, but anything else, Kara, that you think is valuable or important when it comes to how to use Pinterest or just I like the fact that you talked about it is not about just creating content. It's about contextually figuring out what the audience is trying to achieve.
Yeah. And I think just kind of creating a visual identity for your brand. Pinterest is such a visual platform, much like Instagram. So if you're a company that has a visual element to it, maybe you're a fashion company or maybe you're a paint company like I just talked about, it's really awesome if you can have that visual display of your brand. So people can kind of look at it and know, you know, whether or not this is the right product for them, because I think that's what we all want to do is, you know, find the right products that are a good fit for us. And a lot of times you can kind of tell what a company's look and feel is like just by looking at what they're pinning or what kind of things resonate with them.
And that's a good point, because a lot of social channels out there for sure are really, from a brand perspective, it's hard to get your brand, visual brand voice through, because unless it's a really visually driven channel like Pinterest, it's hard to kind of curate your own visual brand.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about the comment about being visual is with Pinterest, you have people that can now search two different ways. They can search by keyword and topic and interest. They can also do visual search on Pinterest. So that visual is just as important for trying to reach an audience, and having your brand or your products or whatever country wedding in that picture is really important, because visual search is a very big aspect of Pinterest and becoming bigger. I think Google, you can do visual search, you can search by photos, but I don't know that people use it that way very much. But Pinterest, it's becoming more and more, they're giving more emphasis to it.
Is that through like Pinterest Lens?
Yeah.
Or is that,
yeah, and that's been rolled out to the full app.
Okay.
So yeah.
See?
Yeah, it's cool to see what other people are, you know, pinning and posting to their board. You can also do some kind of like customer or client, you know, exploration just by looking at who's following your pins and see what they're pinning, see really what your audience is interested in, because that's going to tell you a lot about maybe what your product should evolve to be, or maybe who your target audience is and what they actually want and the things that are important to them. So.
Yeah, and one thing that some people might kind of, if we want to pigeonhole different social networks and channels of distribution, one thing that I think is lost sometimes is Pinterest is a really good social referral network. I think for us, just for our brand of Britain, we're seeing, I think, up to 30% of our social referral is from Pinterest, if not more. So we get a lot of traffic to our blogs and things like that, just because we cross-share that content, we curate it into different boards and things like that on Pinterest. So you're creating social signals, and you're creating backlinks, and you're creating content that other segments of your audience might, you know, find interesting. So.
And Pinterest is such a good one too, because I think you can always know that it's going to be an uplifting, inspiring place to be. Whereas, you know, if you think about Facebook or Twitter, a lot of times those have a negative connotation with them, or sort of that just upsetting feeling that you get when you come across something that you didn't want to see, or an upsetting Facebook post. So the good thing about Pinterest is it's all pretty upbeat, it's all pretty inspiring. You can go there and kind of know what you're looking for and really find something really helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, Instagram most of the time too has that, you know, on the sentiment spectrum, it's going to be more positive, whereas, you know, some
Pinterest,
Facebook, Twitter,
it's like Twizzlers. It makes you happy.
makes you happy. So
That's good.
I don't.
You're not
Twizzlers,
gonna fold your arms now.
Twizzlers,
Yeah.
they don't really make me happy. So meh. Anyway. All right. Anything that we see on the horizon when it comes to content curation, distribution? We talked a little bit about paid content distribution and so forth. What we're seeing there is obviously much more added layers and granular ways of targeting segments and subsegments, which is interesting to us for sure.
And I think that as they continue to add more targeting layers, it makes that content more relevant to the people. So engagement and clicks and all that will go up, which is positive. I think that you know, more platforms like Facebook or other social networks find ways to distribute the content and make it relevant, and find new ways to deliver content, whether it be through an app like Messenger, or through Facebook itself, or
well, didn't Facebook talk about adding a curation section or something past week or so?
They've been
something
testing
like
all kinds of things.
Well,
So
they test everything. So
I think a hard thing that's going to be a problem that we're probably going to have to confront is who is responsible for curating content for what. You know, who gets to decide what content gets the most views, or who gets to decide, you know, what defines these categories. You know, what makes a good country wedding? Would you want to pull in inspiration from something that isn't necessarily a country wedding, or would you want to just go specifically into that category and do a deep dive of that? And it's even more relevant when you talk about news or Facebook algorithms and things like that. We've seen a lot of that.
The machines control us.
Yeah, so who's going to be in charge of deciding what news goes into what categories, or what content goes into what categories? And I think that's going to be a big issue. Obviously, it already is an issue that people have to confront. And who's calling the shots on, you know, what defines a country wedding? What defines, you know, a strictly Republican stance on this, or a strictly Democratic stance on this? And kind of balancing, you know, I think the good thing about segmentation is you always find what you want. But the rough thing about segmentation is you kind of miss that crossover, or that inspiration from another group that maybe, you know, you don't like what they're saying, or like exactly the way they think, but I think it's important to hear those. Or even if you're planning a wedding, like you said, you know, I want a country wedding, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to look on, you know, a really glamorous wedding site, and maybe I'll want to pull some elements of that into this. So I think the struggle of what you lose with the segmentation is you lose that crossover value, that value of thinking in a different way, outside of the box. And I'm curious if it's going to make people a little bit less creative, I guess, because we're all so narrow-minded in what we're searching for at the beginning. We don't get confronted.
great point. Black or white versus gray, right? So
Says the person wearing gray.
yes, and we're gonna
And
end
black.
this. We're gonna end this live stream with me realizing that I wore the same shirt last month.
Did you?
Yes, I did. So
Man.
anyway, all right. Well, thank you, Kira. Thank you, Dave, for participating
You
in the
should
panel.
check out Pinterest for some fashion.
Yes,
Yeah.
I
I'm
need
sure you
to
could
do
find
that.
more gray shirts if you Pinterest search.
Yes. Go to BrittonMDG.com and check us out. Go to our blog. We write a lot of stuff. We do a digital update every Friday. We have a section called Agency Life, which is kind of a parody on things that happen to us and so forth in our crazy industry. So other than that, we'll see you next month, last Friday, and we'll do a case study on something, so on a project. So thank you all for tuning in.